Hi everyone, I'm Leslie and I'm here with Michael Vanderaa, who is a professional photographer here in Chicago, and he's been experienced in photography for the past 35 years, but has been shooting professionally for the past decade. So he's here to talk to us and give us some advice for our next photo shoot so that we feel more comfortable around the camera and can just crush our next photo shoot.
You made me sound really old.
That's not what I meant to do.
35 years. Many of you watching aren't even 35 years old, and I've been experimenting with photography for 35 years.
So he's got a lot to tell us. We've got a lot to learn. Let's jump into it.
That's one way to look at it.
So you do a lot of photography, a lot of different kinds of photo shoots. Now, where do you draw your inspiration from before you do a photo shoot or put together a lookbook?
I draw my inspiration from fashion photography, and of course Peter Lindbergh is a photographer that instantly comes to mind.
So the two main things you got to focus on when you're taking a good picture is lighting and composition. So starting off with talking about lighting, now how do you know what kind of lighting you want to use, whether you're doing a studio shoot and you're working with studio lighting or whether you're working with natural light?
I love the lighting part of photography because after all, photography is drawing with light. So photography is all about capturing light. So I find it really exciting to come up with different kinds of lightings, use mixed lighting, whether it's natural light or studio light. I really don't have a strong preference, but I do like dramatic light. When I got started in photography, I was afraid of shadows. And I thought maybe shadows were a bad thing when I was taking a portrait. But then as I became more confident in my photography and began to understand lighting better and understood what I was trying to do, I really had fun creating shadows on people's faces. Another thing that's really fun when it comes to lighting is mixing color temperatures. So I've worked in the studio where I work with a studio strobe, which may be 5500K, but then I'll introduce a tungsten light, which is maybe 3200K, and you can get some really interesting things happening with not only playing with light and shadow, but playing with the different color temperatures as well.
Yeah, and that can be really difficult. I know I've tried doing that before and it didn't really work out for me, but that's okay. Photography isn't my best strong suit. But definitely, yeah, playing with color temperature is a great way to spice up your photos. But also something that we really got to get into is composition. So, and composition is so important when you're taking a photo, you know, like maybe having the person stand in the middle center of your photo is what you were going for and maybe it's working, but other times you want to, you know, follow the rule of thirds and spice it up, make it look a little more pleasing to the eye. But what do you keep in mind when you're composing your photographs?
Yeah, it's interesting. When people talk about composition in photography, a lot of beginning photographers especially think of buildings or roads or fences as how you can create strong compositions. But when it comes to talking about composition with people, or especially composition taking a portrait, that gets a little more difficult to talk about because we're dealing with a person's face and we don't have necessarily line and shape, at least the way we're used to thinking about line and shape. But when I was teaching photography, I'd encourage all my students to just think about a person as line and shape, right? We have arms, legs, those create lines, those are different shapes. Even within the face, we have different shapes. And so we can come up with as interesting compositions, photographing people in the studio or portraiture in the studio as we can, you know, whether we're filming architecture or landscape outside. So I think one of the things, especially I would encourage new photographers to keep in mind is get closer. Don't be afraid to get close, right, when you're taking a portrait. There was a famous photographer who once said that if you don't like your photographs, chances are you're just not close enough. So experiment with getting closer and experiment with seeing your subject, the person you're photographing, as line and shape. Yeah, so many photographers, you know, we were trained growing up to think about, like, if we were taking a picture of a person, that their entire head had to be in the photo, right? But we can create some really interesting photographs and really interesting compositions if we have the top of the person's head leave the image frame or the side of their face leave the image frame, right? We have to get close in order to do that, but that can create some really interesting photos.
I know we said that I'm not the best photographer out there, but if I was about to take one of your cameras and go shoot with somebody, what's something you would make sure I know right before I go take those photos?
I'd say the first thing is pay attention to the light. Look at the light. You can shoot by window light, all sorts of light, but be aware of the light and be aware of how the light is falling on your subject. Again, as we said earlier, photography is all about drawing with light. So if we're not paying attention to it, then we're gonna have a bad drawing. That didn't make sense.
I thought that made sense to me.
Pay attention to the light. Absolutely pay attention to the light. Don't be afraid to get close, and don't be afraid to see your subject as line and shape. It can be difficult for us to think about people as line and shape. We're really photographing line and shape, no different than if we're photographing anything else.
Okay, so that leads me into my next point is posing your models. Now this can be super difficult because when you're working as a photographer, usually you're not working with professional models who have been doing this their whole life and who are super comfortable in front of the camera. Like maybe you're shooting a family portrait or a wedding photo of just two people that don't really have modeling experience. So what is advice you would give to a photographer on how to pose their models to make their models feel more comfortable in front of the camera?
Yeah, I actually had the chance to work with a couple professional models not that long ago, and it really is a dream come true for a photographer because they really didn't need any direction, which was a lot of fun. But most people are unsure of how to pose or how to model. I try to encourage the model to think about breaking their wrist or breaking their elbow, breaking their limbs so that they have some interesting shapes. If they're stiff and rigid, that's not going to create as interesting of shapes. And if see, this is the danger. This is what I always want to start demonstrating it. So I'm not going to demonstrate it on video because every time I do, everyone laughs. So I'm not going to capture that on video.
Now you know how the models feel. It's
right,
uncomfortable.
Right. It is uncomfortable. So yeah, I asked the models to break all their joints and create some interesting shapes, but it can be uncomfortable. And oftentimes what is uncomfortable for the model looks great on camera, but it does feel awkward and it's not comfortable. But I like lines, and when I think about knees or elbows, arms and legs, where we create angles, right, as opposed to being rigid and stiff.
Is there any advice you would give yourself as a young photographer? Anything you wish you knew back then?
That's a good question. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I think I would encourage myself not to doubt myself so much and to just keep shooting and keep experimenting. In today's visual culture, where we're so used to seeing all these images on Instagram and TikTok, and people are generating content like crazy, and we're bombarded with that. We start to compare ourselves. We start to think, oh, well, that guy's photography is better than mine, and you get discouraged. But the only way to get better is just keep shooting. And so I wouldn't have doubted myself as much. I would have kept exploring, kept shooting. I would have tried different editing styles, tried different lighting styles without fear of failure, or I should say without trying to copy someone all the time. So I think my advice to my younger self would be just keep shooting, keep experimenting, and don't be so self-conscious about my own work. There's a lot of times that I think I have some images that are no good, or other photographers may think are poor images, and then I look back on them a few years later and I say, well, that was a good image, or that was really strong, and I shouldn't have doubted myself. I should have put it out there for the whole world to see. Stop comparing yourself, keep shooting, keep putting your work out there.
That's good advice. I mean, I feel inspired already.
Good.
I feel like I could take a better photo, so
good.
Thank you for that. I mean, creating art in general is putting you in a vulnerable situation. So it's like if you're already going to be vulnerable, might as well just put all your images out there, just like try different styles of taking photos, try whatever you can, but like at the end of the day, you're only going to end up showing people your best work. So don't be afraid to try something new if you think you're going to fail at it. Might as well fail and try than never do it at all.
You're absolutely right. Fail early and fail often. You're going to create a million bad photographs right before you start creating good photographs.
Yeah.
So you might as well get those 1 million photographs behind you.
Thank you so much for talking with us, Michael. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Also, if you thought it was helpful, or maybe you're going to watch it before your next photo shoot, make sure to give it a thumbs up and then maybe leave us a comment down below if you have any questions. We'd love to respond to them. But thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.
Bye.